The strongest aspect of analog horror has to be its ability to truly strike you at your personal core, making you feel like your personal space is actively being invaded. Just the mere act of viewing the content poses a threat to your safety. To be fair, that sense of looking over your shoulder can come from all sorts of horror and thriller content, but analog horror is really the one to hit the nail when it comes to making it feel right at home. This is one of the main reasons why analog horror content like Greylock and Vita Carnis were so intensely frightening. In each series, it was a major point that the creatures could very easily get into your homes undetected, and from the glimpses I've seen of Basswood County, this one is all about it. You guys sent me some recommendations for this series, so by all means, I'm very excited to check this one out. However, if we end up with wet shorts and endless nightmares, don't be looking at me. Basswood County Humanoid Alert. Entry 1. At 2:26 in the morning, the emergency broadcast system is activated by local Basswood County authorities to issue a warning involving a humanoid creature that has invaded the area. As of this moment, there has already been 11 murders. 11 murders seems like a lot before going public. Any contact with this creature is likely to result in the loss of limbs, including straight-up decapitation, but they also partake in neck stabbings as well.
The victims' bodies show decapitation, absence of arms and hands due to amputation, stabbing in the neck. It is clear that there is a hostile creature around you and you should do the following. Close your doors and windows. Grab any weapon. Hide in your basement or the attic.
After being given our instructions, the characteristics of these creatures are then listed on screen. We learn that they are tall with long limbs, fingers, and neck, not to mention an unnatural face, menacing eyes, and they're smiling. It also says they have short brown hair, so I guess we won't have any blonde attackers. To help us further keep our safety intact from these monsters, we are shown 5 police sketches drawn based on eyewitness accounts. These people are incredibly lucky, as it seems the likelihood of surviving an encounter with one of these things are far to none. The first 3 figures seem pretty normal, but 4 and 5 are where it starts to get unsettling. Is it strange that I find image 5 scarier than image 4? Following the images, we are presented with actual footage being provided. Are these those eyewitness encounters? Because I don't think I said I'm ready yet. What gets presented to us at first is just this "have you seen this face" poster stuck up on a tree. The quality makes it pretty much impossible to read out what it typed out at the bottom, but the face alone is something I would not want to see walking alone at night. The camera pans directly downwards to a sewer grate where we hear a deep guttural growl coming from below. Yeah, I probably won't be sleeping tonight. The next piece of footage we get comes straight from inside the victim's home. This is the kind of stuff I was talking about, where it gets a bit too personal for my liking. Our poor victim stands in their empty dark hallway, where ominous laughter can be heard from the void. Unfortunately, once the humanoid figure reveals himself, our character doesn't stand much chance. It appears the creature takes control of the camera to show off his handiwork. According to officials, what was found in the basement of the home was just this image here. Pardon my incredibly rough translation, the quality makes this one quite difficult. In summary, this reads to us that this creature is going to kill everyone in the family, and it's going to cut them up into many pieces, and that it looks like a human. This looks to be from a very long time ago. Ancient even, I'd say. Perhaps this creature has been around for a lot longer than this county previously believed. The next piece of footage we get isn't anything less frightening, as we are back at home and we are unfortunately not alone. As our cameraman is filming, it appears that he is already aware of a presence, as it seems he is trying to keep himself hidden. This image might be telling enough of our victim's fate. It appears this series is truly going deep into analog horror's traditional roots. Whilst I see the argument that emergency broadcast systems and humanoid creatures are becoming a bit gimmicky and oversaturated when used in analog horror, there's a reason that this is so frequently seen throughout. It's just so damn scary. It's the idea of something being so frightening with so little. It's why image 5 is arguably scarier than image 4. Image 5 looks more human than image 4, but less human than normal. The threat response in the brain gets triggered because there's an underlying intensity building in what should look more familiar than the actual monster-looking image. I have a sneaking suspicion the horrors inflicted on Basswood County are far, far from over. But before we get too far, just wanted to say if you enjoy what you're watching and want to see more, be sure to hit all those neat buttons down below, including the subscribe and bell notification, as it truly helps us out, as we are slowly but surely on our way to the 100K mark. I'll have social links in the description for the Instagram and letterbox if you'd like to check those out as well. But alright, now you can pass through. Detective Jeff Alberson's Tapes, 1998. Entry 2. While investigating one of the victim's homes, Detective Jeff Alberson discovered a series of tapes recorded by the homeowner. On these tapes is said to be recordings from the victim's bedroom before the break-in. We then learn that our character, Detective Jeff Alberson, was the head guy in charge of these tapes, as he was the one who initially collected them, therefore having them named after him. Along with the recordings, police also found a sketchbook that belonged to the same victim. To then we are so pleasantly provided with the contents inside. The initial sketches seem normal at first, but it's once we get to this one right here where things start to get intense. However, back at the Basswood County Police Department, it seems the detective decides to show us one of the tapes he has collected at the scene. The tape begins with our victim driving down the road. Once they return home, however, it's very clear that there's something else in the house with them. At around 3 a.m., it looks as if in-house security cameras detected something at one of the windows. Looks like someone wants inside. Not too long after peeking through the window, the creature successfully makes its way into the home to stand over the victim. The last thing we see is the creature from the sketchbook staring directly back at us. Identity Test. Entry 3. This entry begins on a clip from an old film before, in classic analog fashion, we get this nightmare.
And return to your provincial university. And if I...
We then go on to view a tape that is prohibited by county law for us to view, but my guess is we are going to be viewing it anyway. This looks like an identity test put together to potentially assist people in catching one of these figures. If its intention is to assist, then why is it prohibited to watch? Straight out of the fear assessment, we are shown a series of images to discern if the person looks normal or not. Our first 3 pass the normal check, but our 4th doesn't fare so well. The next section oddly gets worse, as we are then asked what we think this face looks like, and then we're presented with our options. After a figure turns and shows his face, we are met with repeated text that reads, "I will tell you what your mind cannot comprehend." After all that craziness, we are met with just this unsettling image, where at the last frame switches to this nightmare. What comes next appears to be a recording of some sort of transformation, as if the creature is evolving to the next stage. Or could it be that this was once a normal human, who under unfortunate circumstances transformed into one of the creatures that prey at night? You can also see the year is 2002, so a little bit more ahead than our previous entries. The footage we are presented with next truly rocked me to my core. This took the "your mind will create something worse" to a whole new level. I wasn't sure if a face was going to come flinging from behind the curtain, but honestly, getting the censor bar was worse, because it just meant what I'd conjured up was what it actually looked like. This feeling didn't last too long, however, as this was another one of those guess the faces, and our options are soon shown at the bottom. This next section we go into takes the series into a whole new direction, and our story takes a bit of a twist. We get met with text that just reads, "The failure of Jeff Alberson," before we then get a nice little illustration of our character. What could possibly have happened with the detective? We cut back to more footage taken from 2002, and it appears to be looking at some of Jeff's documents spread across the table. The first paper on the desk is hard to make out. It appears to be a classified document where we see the illustration of the detective next to another, more sinister looking image. The next paper on the desk tells us about a humanoid creature that lures its victims in with its voice. So not only is it humanoid, but it can take the voices of other people. The third paper has this frightening drawing where it just says "it's staring at me," written big to the side. There's also something written at the bottom here, and all I could really make out was, "What does it look like?" at the top, and then "What do I look like?" at the bottom, alongside "Who are you?" which is very difficult to see and read. We look over all the documents once more before it seems a visitor decides to join in. Is it possible that that was the detective? Who's to say for sure, but the next piece of footage takes us to what appears to be in someone's house. Perhaps another one of Alberson's tapes being played. Yeah, I would just end it all right then and there if I saw that in my window. The next bit of text we get tells us something beyond what I was ever expecting. So according to this, out in the middle of the woods somewhere is a chamber where all of these creatures are coming from, and said chamber acts as a doorway into another realm. Well, ladies and gentlemen, that was certainly not what I was expecting. After we get that bomb of information, we are met with footage of this guy sitting, seemingly watching something on a screen. We zoom out to see that it looks like someone is actually watching him on a screen. The camera glitches out a bit and appears to alert the man that someone is watching, but right after we get met with this sketch. Is this what happened to the man after the attack, or was this his attacker? Unfortunately, the fear does not give us a break, as this next scene yet again almost sent me backwards. Just a face in the dark and a whisper to get such a fear reaction. Horror at its finest. It's not quite clear where this next piece of footage takes place, but my guess is we are back in another victim's house. This time, however, we peek around the corner to see what looks more like an alien creature staring off to the side. As expected, our alien soon turns around to give us a good front view of this horrific design. This entry was full of juicy lore and info on the world and the ever-developing story. But there was something small at the beginning that may contain clues to a bigger picture. Right at the start, we are presented with a clip from this old movie. Well, this isn't just a random throwaway scene from just any old film. It's 1959's The Scapegoat, which just a simple gloss over the synopsis made me do a little eyebrow raise. A man is tricked into trading places with a look-alike with murderous plans. This right here leads me to believe that Jeff Alberson might have an alternate running around doing dastardly deeds. It's likely Jeff had already been killed by one of the creatures, to which they assumed his form to go continue on. This entry isn't about an identity test, but about revealing identity theft. The Chamber, Entry 4. It looks like we might finally be getting answers as to what exactly this chamber is, and perhaps where it could have come from. It appears that this goes way back further than could possibly be imagined, with Mr. Calvin Basswood himself discovering the place in 1868. In his diary, it reads that the place looked like something from the future, and that not a single other person knew of its existence. Without even knowing who could have built it, Calvin Basswood heads inside and reports finding humans, except there was something off about all of them. Said to have shown no emotion and no response. He also says they had unnatural limbs, and it looked as if tree roots were growing out of their backs. Sounds exactly like all the creatures that had been attacking people in the county years later. Once the creatures inside started to become hostile, Calvin managed to escape, to which he then named the place the Chamber. After getting that story, we are met with this image where all it says is, "I will wear your skins as a suit." The process starts to become more clear once we get this missing poster for Andy Stevens. The next couple images shown are of Andy Stevens after his transformation. So here lies the question. Was Andy a regular human who got turned into one of the humanoid creatures? Or was Andy swapped out with a humanoid figure who took on his likeness? Things are starting to point to the second option there, it seems. After all of that is covered, we are introduced to a little new plot thread. According to reports, in 1996, a group from Philadelphia came down to investigate all the missing cases piling up in Basswood. Apparently, the group managed to find the chamber and filmed everything they saw. The footage starts out on a familiar missing poster for Andy Stevens, before panning around and showing us what looks to be the entrance to the chamber. The crew begins to peek in through glass and grates to try and capture anything they can find from the outside. All that can be made out, however, is music coming from deep within. The group ends up entering the chamber, and from this point, it appears we get illustrations of what they saw upon going inside. On the immediate right side of the chamber lies this man with the top of his head cut off, and his arms held out. It also looks as if his left side had just been completely ripped open. The photos behind him on the wall lead me to believe that this might just be the real Andy Stevens. The next illustration we see is of the left side of the chamber, where it appears just to be a little screen and a creepy doll sitting next to it. In front of the screen lies a tape, however. That tape, as it turns out, is actually the identity test tape we saw earlier in the series. Is this a video they play on repeat to the victim to drive them mad? It could also be a tape for the humanoids to help them know what humans look out for. Might be a stretch, but who knows. We then get to see a close-up of a little note stuck above the screen that just reads, "I will tell you what your mind cannot comprehend." A repeated phrase in the series I believe will be coming back strong later. Progressing further on, the left side, we see a clock table said to have human remains and a skull all littered on top of it. A corpse of a woman is also found where her eyes were missing and her mouth lacked all her teeth. It's also said her skin looked as if it was melting like wax. We then get an illustration of the roots coming out of the back of the body. Well, half of the body. The next bit of footage we get looks to be back outside the chamber, out in the woods. It doesn't sound like anything is out there, and I can't see anything either. But perhaps they sense something I don't. After the footage ends, we get photos of what eventually ended up being out there. We then learn that out of 7 people who went on this expedition, only 2 made it out alive. Presented to us afterwards is a whole illustrated map of the chamber, seeing a top-down view of the left and right sides of this chamber and all the horrors found within. After viewing at the front entrance, we are then met with the place these creatures supposedly came from, the window. We quickly cut away from the illustrations and move to a tape that I'm going to say was created by a humanoid. We are introduced to this doctor character who goes on to say he will explain to us details about the human anatomy, all the while faces appear for a quick second in and out. From the sounds of it, this might actually be a video played to the victims that wind up in a very unfortunate predicament. An explanation process as to how in the following moments a humanoid is going to take control. So this is leading me to think that they take control of a host instead of taking their likeness and acting as a copy. But everything else points to a copy, so I'm just going to stick with that for right now. He goes on to describe this core that gets created in the body as a way for them to control you. But then he goes on to say that the brains of humans and humanoids are different. What I believe is real or not is truly getting tested at this moment. After he lists the characteristics of the humanoids that had been previously described to us, it looks as if we will get to bear witness to a humanoid transformation. Interestingly enough, as the stages go on, the more normalish the figure looks. It then tells us that it takes time for them to reform their faces to look like ours, so it is a copy pretty much. We are then shown all the stages at once, with the last stage being the same image that was telling us it would wear our skins. Very disturbing indeed. Basswood County Killer, Entry 5. This entry begins and we are immediately getting warned of a suspected murderer roaming around the county.
All residents of Basswood County must stay alert for a suspected murderer. Close any entrance to your house and grab a firearm.
We are then shown a sketch of the suspect, and to be honest, looks like a humanoid to me. After looking at that face for too long, we listen in on a Radio Basswood emergency broadcast, warning all the residents of the serial killer out on the loose. However, the man on the radio goes on to tell us that witnesses describe the perpetrator as not a normal human being. It's said as well that sometimes they don't even kill the victims, they just tie them up and leave them there. This isn't normal humanoid behavior, it seems. Originally, they aren't known for toying with the prey, they go right for the ripping of limbs off, but not this sort of actual serial killer behavior. Not only are the humanoids all out for blood, but there are different divisions with different sinister motives. At the end of the recording, we are presented with the last known recording of the killer off of CCTV cameras. This is straight up one of those Ring doorbell nightmares. Text appears that just says keep running as we are presented with more footage. It isn't clear why the event we are watching is being filmed. Perhaps our camera person felt something was up and decided to film for safety. Too bad it didn't seem to help in the long run. After running into the serial killer, we are then shown an illustration of what looks to be the victim all tied up. It also looks as if they were completely wrapped around so that they would slowly die of suffocation. The last bit of footage we see here isn't too clear, but at first glance to me it looked like a headless body. But it looks like it could be a multitude of things. This county has already had enough trouble, and now they have this new maniac to take care of. Before you sleep, informational tape, final entry. This entry begins and all we are met with is text saying, "I feel like my soul is being dragged into that place. A parasite taking over my mind. I can't sleep anymore. I'm going insane." So it sounds like these humanoids are able to somehow lure these people to the chamber to then go through the swapping process. Apparently this sort of thing was happening to a bunch of other people as well across Basswood County, as they had to make an informational tape on how to get better sleep, instead of being truthful and saying there's a chamber hypnotizing you to give up your life. However, the tape does go on to say it will give us methods on how to keep a spiritual distance between us and then something else that is censored. After this, however, the entry begins to take its dark turn.
This tape will give you methods to have a healthy sleep and make a spiritual distance between you and me.
If I wasn't awake before, I most certainly am now. We are quick at getting back to our informational tape, thank God, just telling us when the correct times to go to bed are. But we are then also told to look at the clock and to make sure it's ticking. Why would the clock be stopped? We get another cut in, except this time it just appears to be an empty room. However, not for long. Back to the informational video, things look a little different. We are told to sleep, bury our consciousness, and let them in. Then, right before our very eyes, we see this victim in bed go through a transformation, and in the next frame shows something pretty eye-opening. I don't know about you, but it looks like this thing just sprouted out at the top of his head. This just solidified my current theory as to where this series is headed. My guess is that the humanoids originated as some sort of alien parasite that managed to find its way to Earth. Granted, the chamber doesn't look very alien-like, but Calvin Basswood did describe it as something out of the future. So maybe he saw something the group didn't, or did and didn't film. From the way Andy Stevens' body was found in the chamber, he too had the top of his head completely opened up. And that wound would make a lot more sense if that's where these creatures were coming from. Burrowing away inside the body and creating a core that allows them to begin controlling the host, to which then after, they can burst out of the host's head and start to take on the shape. I believe this had to have been what happened to Detective Jeff Alberson. What an excellent twist on the doppelganger trend that has been associated with analog horror since its inception. I'm sure the stories behind Basswood County are far from over, as this last entry was uploaded about 3 weeks ago, so it seems like we got some more content on the way. This analog horror series really went back to the roots of the genre, yet added enough twists and turns to make it a unique experience from the rest. I really felt like the story was progressing with each entry, and it was never trying to tackle something too over the top where the immersion gets lost. Throughout its entirety, it was able to maintain my interest and the intense feeling of constantly being under threat, taking the dangers and bringing them right into your home against something you stand no chance against. Basswood County just continued to show that there is plenty of room left with an analog horror to keep it fresh and disturbing, and I just love to see all the ways people are able to craft and tell their stories. Its blending of live footage with the creature design was also a pleasant surprise, as no matter what way the story was being told in, whether live footage or text, it constantly had me on edge, yet eager to learn more about what these humanoids truly were. Be sure to check out Dark Mind's channel, as there's way more analog horror stuff over there than just Basswood County, and it all looks really interesting to check out. I'll have it linked down below, so be sure to check that out as well. But that about does it for this video. Be sure to keep filling the comments up with requests, as that's where I get most of my ideas from, but other than that, if you enjoyed the video, please give it the good old like, and be sure to hit that subscribe and bell notification to be a part of each new video. I thoroughly enjoyed this analog horror series, and can't wait to see what comes next.